Welcome to the Reactive Training Systems podcast. This is your producer, Jim Ellie, and today Mike Tushir, Ryan Stills, and his coach, Mark Robb, sit down as they talk about his prep for what would have been IPF Masters Worlds in South Africa. Now, unfortunately, this event never happened due to the human malware situation, and this event has been postponed for now. However, the conversation is really interesting between Ryan and Mike and Mark because they all have a massive amount of training experience and training history, and they have been competing in powerlifting and training in powerlifting for a long time. So their conversation, their dialogue about preparation for competition is something that I think can be taken from this episode. And as you listen to them talk and as they discuss their experiences, I want you to think about that and see what we can learn from it and see what we can take away from it as gyms begin to open up again. Are your gyms opening back up? We know that a lot are. Have you created a home gym? Are you still training? Are you struggling with training? What is your motivation level like? And is there anything that you feel like you can learn from this podcast as you dive into it? That's all I got to say. If you like this podcast, please consider subscribing, sharing it to your friends. And that's all for today. And I hope you have a good one. I'll talk to you in the next one.
Imagine scenario. So here we are. You're currently training to go to Masters Worlds in South Africa. And we're not far away from that. Just a handful of weeks, really, when you think about it. So nominations aren't final yet, but and I don't want to put too much too much on it, but I was looking at the nominations. You're sitting on top of the 120 class in the M1s, which is a really nice place to be.
I'll take it.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, I'm sure nobody sits there at nominations and then hopes for anything less. So I'm sure that your aim is to make that a reality on May 3rd. So if we go back to Raw Nationals in October 2019, and I'm there handling you, and you said that you were lucky to even be there and be competing at that time. And, oh, by the way, you still put up an 850 kilo total and an 8 for 9 performance. So how does that happen?
So only Ryan.
So there's a couple things that were going on, and one of them was I ran into I don't know if you ever heard of orthostatic hypotension.
I have not.
Okay, so essentially it's your blood pressure when you're in a seated or cross your lying position does not catch up when you stand up. So you get really lightheaded and dizzy. Okay. I had that for, help me out here, Mark, but maybe noticed it really bad probably 3 months before Nationals, which meant anything I was doing from squats to deadlifts, we really couldn't do a whole lot more than singles. Because I got to a point where I felt like I was going to pass out. And we tried, and I say we because Mark and I are very close in when we're working on our training and how things are progressing, and so if I've got an issue, it's something that we're normally on the phone fairly quickly to find out, hey, what do we have, what can we do? And it was that. So it was, I tried, having a looser belt. I tried no belt. I tried, how do we do things at a lighter weight? I tried, so we played with a lot of different things just to get stimulus to find some sort of maintenance or growth where we could. And that was a lot of what it was. And then I got on a restrictive diet because they thought possibly it was tied into some of the things that I was eating. So I dropped on, I think I competed at about 115 kilos at the 120 kilo at National. I think I weighed 115. So I didn't have a problem trying to eat up to weight, but I was on a restricted diet at that point also. So you got the combination of, not really having I wasn't having grains. I was trying to find other sources for carbs. They didn't want me to have any potatoes. Restricted on the meats that I had. And then so yeah, that was a lot that went in. That's probably 3 months out, which is kind of that prime time that you want to be aiming towards being your best self on the platform. And I was just trying to be myself in day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a lot to deal with. So you're on this restrictive diet and you lost a bunch of weight. Did it eventually get under control then?
No, well, it didn't get under control. What happened was we were able to kind of identify times that I would have good days and times I would have worse days. And when I say good, it was, I still, because of not having a lot of time under heavier weights, it took a while to kind of get acclimated to that. And then once I'd start to get acclimated, maybe a 2 weeks stint, I'd have a drop off and I couldn't do multiple reps again. So we identified a couple of things, my doctors and I, as to foods to stay away from, time of day that I train, just these really things that I never thought at 42, 43 years old I'd have to deal with. And once again, it's of my own doing. I don't have to lift and train and compete,
True.
But I've also never backed out of a competition. So when I said I was going to do it, I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have a couple days to be good, some to be bad. So coming into nationals, I don't think I maybe had 2 weeks where I had more than 600 pounds on my back coming into there within like a 3-month stint. And deadlifting, I didn't hit reps on deadlift over maybe 400 pounds. And I think I was opening around 705, 717. So yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Man.
Well, no, I was just saying, yeah, that's right. It's Ryan's a freak.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you guys have had to get really creative to work around the problem then. Like, I mean,
yeah, I think it was kind of just do whatever. I mean, we'd try to design a program that was doable, but then it had to make adjustments. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but pretty much on the fly, on a workout per workout or session per session basis.
yeah. Well, like, and first of all, put a little context in here. An 850 kilo total is not terribly far off your all-time best. I mean, it's 22 kilos off, but like when you think about it, considering what the issues that you're talking about, like being down a lot of weight, body weight, and not being able to train multiple reps, not being able to train as heavy as you would like to come in and total what you totaled and have the performance that you did, that's a pretty huge win from where I sit. And yeah, I mean, the kinds of restrictions that you're talking about, to find a way to still win in that situation, yeah, that seems like that's getting pretty creative on my end.
And that's the reason I said Ryan's a freak, because it seems like one thing I've learned about Ryan is he always shows up and he always gets it done. It's like, okay, training was terrible leading up to this. Okay, still going to do well.
Yeah. Well, you do strike me as having that kind of that kind of personality, like the kind of person, some people just do better in a competition environment,
Yeah, I think I have over 100 competitions under my belt by this point. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think.
See, I was wondering about that.
There. Yeah.
I was wondering about that because I was looking through. Well, I know you've posted a little bit about your competition history, just that I've seen on social media. But then I got on Open Powerlifting and I'm looking at the records there, and I thought, it must be a bit incomplete. So I was kind of wondering how far back. I guess this is a good time then to segue into the fuller story. When did you get started lifting weights and then competing?
So I started lifting weights. I remember my father got me set. So he was track athlete, baseball guy in college. Then he coached some high school and college track. So I grew up as a track kid. We played football. Then I was running track by 7 years old. So I had a bar and 10-pound plates that were sealed on it. So I think it was probably a 45-pound bar. And I was told every day, when I had a chance to go downstairs, and I was doing either step ups on the stairs that we had, or toe raises, lunges, whatever it was, he had me being active. And that was from a young age. I think I was probably 11, 12 years old when I started doing that. And I was probably I was in 8th grade, and I went to a high school powerlifting meet. So I'm originally from Wisconsin. The high school powerlifting had been going on there since the 70s with Bruce Sullivan was my mentor originally, my high school coach, and he had started the Wisconsin State high school program. I think I want to say it was about 79, but Bruce, he's still involved there. But so I went and saw one of their meets, and I'm 13, 14 years old, and I watch these boys and girls in the gym, and there's a kid that's my age, and he's a freshman in high school. I see him deadlift 185 pounds. Now, mind you, this is also during the time that there's only, and this is probably 1990, and there's only geared lifting. There's only, single ply suits and bench shirts, and that's how you competed. So I see this kid my size, which at the time was probably about 123 pounds, and he deadlifted 185 pounds. And I went home that day and I loaded 185 pounds in my deadlift bar. And when I say deadlift bar, I'm, I think I had the sand weights with the plastic coating on them. And I lifted that up at 185 pound deadlift, and I thought, man, I'm pretty good at this. So I started competing in 1992 in high school at 16 years old. My junior year, I was 165er.
That's cool. That's cool. So did you just pretty much keep with it from that point?
Pretty much. I was not good. So let me make sure I put that out there. I was not. I mean, our high school team had state level, national level competitors on it, and I was not one of them. I went to state my senior year, and I think I took 8th. And man, being in the top 10, I was like, once again, I'm like, hi, I'm doing okay. But I was a track football kid. I mean, I was, I think I did the Reebok Combine coming out of high school and ran like a 4.4 840. I think my vert was 38.5 inches, and I won that down in Chicago. So I was an athletic guy. Nick Taluki is similar. Nick kind of was that same, and for those of you who don't know the Freak Show, but he and I actually did junior nationals with Char Gahagan. That's my class of guys that we were with. But yeah, so I was athletic. Yeah, not too bad to compete with. But yeah, so I stuck with it through high school, went to college, ran track, kind of football stuff. Didn't really do much until I was about, got back into it around 20, when I decided that I wanted to gain weight. I wanted to be, I mean, I was always a small kid, and I would see pro wrestlers. I mean, I loved watching, the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal. I looked at those guys, especially them being in Chicago, me just being north there in Racine, Wisconsin. You'd see them wrestling for AWA wrestling, and I thought I want to be like that. That's what I want to be. And they're 6 foot, 250 pounds, and I'm 5'10", 160 pounds. So about 20 years old, I decided I was gonna start training again and try putting on some size. And that was kind of where it went until 2000. I did junior nationals, and that's where I met Nick Taluki. And Char Gahagan had the deadlift record of like 733 for our class at that time, and I won junior nationals. And yeah, from then on, I pretty much stayed with it in some capacity.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's kind of where the results I was able to find when I was kind of digging through the past a little bit, doing my homework. So what I saw, you would have been about 25, I believe. So not in the juniors anymore, but competing at single ply nationals, and you totaled 800 kilos. And if all my documentation's correct, that was a 4th place finish in a pretty tough division too. And then you fast forward to like, I look at where your personal best numbers are, And now we're talking about raw lifting. So go from single ply to raw lifting, and you're 41 and you total 872.5 kilos. So plus 72.5 kilos minus single ply equipment. And also that day you had 2 missed lifts that would have made it very nearly around 100 kilo increase in your total. So that stood out to me as a pretty remarkable arc.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those, and you lifted geared lifting, and I think that the thing that sometimes we missed during that time was the training like an athlete, which I think is something that has been adapted over the last, specifically, I'd say the last 10 years. But back, in the 90s, even early 2000s, I want to say most of us that were lifting in single ply lifting, it was, I remember we used to use the term, it's safety. I use a bench shirt for safety. There's no way I should bench anything more than this weight unless I have a shirt on, because, well, it's not safe. Yet I would watch the NFL Combine and see some running back just destroy the 225 reps, and so I mean, it didn't make sense if you're looking at from a true training perspective of strength. But once again, it was tribal knowledge, right? And that's kind of just how we had come up to that point. And I think once, for me, I had taken a little bit of time. I was about 30 years old, just had my first child, and I'd been powerlifting for, by that point, it had been like, 14 years, 15 years. And I decided, what, I want to be more athletic. So there was a team out here in Portland. We just moved to Portland. And there was a team called the Portland Monarchs. It was a minor league football team, AAA minor league football team. And so I played football for them. We went to the national championship game. A couple years after that, had a couple undefeated seasons. I was an All-Northwest. I was a linebacker, defensive lineman, played a little bit of running back still. And I started training like an athlete, speed, explosiveness, plyometrics, a little bit more dumbbells, recruiting, just squatting, doing box squats, but then squatting with, without knee wraps on for the first time in I don't know how long. And then when I decided that I was going to come back to powerlifting, because I would, even during that time, I would do a couple powerlifting meets here and there, do a deadlift for charity, maybe do like a meet that was local just because a friend of mine was doing it. I was working with him. But when I decided I was going to come back, I just heard like, hey, raw lifting is where it's at. That's where the nationals for raw lifting is bigger now than the nationals for single ply. And I felt good because I don't have enough workout partners to get into a shirt or a suit, and I don't have any sponsors. So I mean, when I left, Titan and Inzer were very good to me, and so when I left that, I'm coming back, and I don't have any of them. So I'm looking at spending $500-600 to get back into the sport again, or I can buy some knee sleeves. And at that time, I think Reban was kind of who was doing a lot of the knee sleeves. Right. I'm like, nice. I'll be $60 into getting back into powerlifting.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it definitely made it a lot more accessible. And I mean, I was a lot like you. I think that even competing single ply, I don't know, like there was just like this part of me that always wondered what I could do without it. And even training for single ply competitions, I always trained everybody always trains their raw lifts a lot, but like I was always very interested in it. Like it meant something to me to put 5 pounds on my raw bench. Like that meant something to me. It wasn't just about my equip numbers. So when raw lifting, whenever there was an avenue to compete in raw lifting, especially at a higher and higher level, I was all over that for sure.
Yeah, I didn't like to have a caveat to why my numbers were what they were. I didn't like to tell somebody I bench, 570 pounds. Like, whoa, I'm like, well, in a bench shirt. And,
yeah, and then they go, what's that?
Exactly. Then you have to explain why your numbers are different than someone else. It's like,
right.
They'd see somebody squat in a video, like some of the old Arnold videos, and they'd say, he squatted this for this many. I'm like, I can do that. Well, yeah, I could do that at the time in my single ply suit and my knee wraps. And it was just a different beast. And because we didn't have the correlation, And, when I talk to some of the younger lifters now, they're like, well, why would you have done that? And they just don't know. Like there wasn't a raw division.
Yeah.
It was either do that or get just blown out of the gym,
Yeah.
because as strong as you weren't going to make up. I mean, there's, locally you could probably do some things, but you get the national scene, and you're a raw squatter at 600 pounds and like the 220 class at that time. Well, that's great because, there's a handful of guys that were squatting 800, so it was like you could be 600 raw, but you're giving up 200 pounds in the squat, 100 pounds in the bench. Well, you could still be the strongest guy or girl there, but that's not the sport.
Right.
The sport was in single ply or multiply gear.
Right. Yeah. Well, do you remember having conversations with people about that? Like other powerlifters, I remember it was a thing for a while. Like, hey, when I'm going home for Thanksgiving, and when someone asks me like how much do I bench, like what number do you guys tell them? Do you tell them your equip number? Or do you tell them your raw number? Like, it just seems so weird now to think about it in those terms, but that was like real conversations from 20 years ago, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and to think that the justification of it during the time was not strange. It was
You're
not
right.
odd.
Yeah.
To say,
I mean,
well, you shouldn't, of course you have to put knee wraps on when you go over 500 pounds. I mean, if you don't, you're going to blow out your knees. That everyone knows that, and everyone had the story of the guy they once saw and heard of the guy who did this and that. And, oh yeah, you don't put a bench shirt on. Well, this guy did this and his shoulder just about fell off. So we had all the stories to justify why we were doing what we were doing. And I remember the first person I had seen or heard of had done raw, and I think it was with NASA. And they had the raw division. I don't even know how long ago it was. probably would have been close to 15, maybe 17 years ago. And I had heard of a guy who totaled 1,600 raw as a heavyweight, and I thought, that's crazy. I'm like, he did that with no knee wraps, like no bench shirt, no. Wow, what? That blew my mind. It was like 6'4" and 6, and I thought, wow, yeah, some of those seem like they're okay, but yeah, 1,600 plus total, not wearing a belt, not wearing none of it, and I just couldn't grasp it at the time.
Yeah. So then, I suppose when that avenue of competing became available, it's kind of a no-brainer if you're like already in that kind of headspace, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is one of the greatest things that we've gotten from the raw movement, and not movement. There's still geared lifting, but from raw lifting becoming so popular, it was a lower barrier of entry for the younger people coming out of college and high school.
Yeah.
So you had college athletes that knew what their strength was, and now they didn't have to figure out how to use a suit to be strong. And so you found people coming out and they're lean. Like seeing some of these, actual college athletes coming out at, 6% body fat and, 200 pounds and 5'6". And you're looking at these guys like, oh my gosh, you didn't see a lot of that. You had your anomalies out there. But yeah, to see somebody that young come out and just be that strong and look like an athlete, they look the part also. You had almost that bodybuilder physique. And now it's relatively normal.
Well, it makes the sport a lot more attractive for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's been interesting to me, and I'm not the only person to comment on this too, but like you see this arc in powerlifting physiques if you go back to like the 70s, 80s, and I guess 70s and 80s. By the time you get into the 90s, at least a lot of the most popular stuff, the stuff that was in magazines and stuff like that, was starting to be more heavily equipped, even in the multiply stuff. And especially by the time you get to like the late 90s, I guess the early 90s is probably not that, but by the time you hit the late 90s, multiply's probably at its peak in popularity, and into the early 2000s. And you see this physique shift, right? Like you go from just the physique shift. And I remember thinking at one point, like, I wonder if the equipped lifting selects for that in some way. Like, is there a benefit to being a bit squishier if if you're lifting an equipment. And I remember kind of thinking like that sounded like almost a crazy idea, but I've heard several other equipped lifters talk about that in the time since then. So now I feel like maybe I'm not so crazy for thinking that. But and then like raw lifting becomes what it is, and you see that shift back to a more I guess classic powerlifting style physique. So I think maybe there is some truth to it. But I suppose with that said, do you harbor any sort of aspirations to putting on the equipment again?
So I've had this talk with a buddy of mine. Well, Tony Harris.
Yeah.
And Tony's going to be lifting in gear in South Africa for Masters also. So he's going to be doing the geared side.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to talking about what that looks like, and especially the World Games. The World Games, right? You've heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me? Yeah. No, I know something about the World Games.
Yeah. Only American to win it. Yeah, very good, very good. But and it has its appeal because as we get older, those things. Now I look back and I'm like, you know what? I've had a bum shoulder for a while, and it's a football thing. It wasn't necessarily a powerlifting thing, but 2 surgeries on a shoulder. The hips are this way, the knees are this way, and you think maybe that's my longevity. Maybe that transition back into gear at least sometime could be another way to prolong my career at a high level. So yeah, I mean, it comes around every once in a while. I think about it. Actually, for my wife's younger than I am, and she didn't start in the sport until more recently, Melanie. And she, for her birthday, one of the things I got her was Inzer Champion suit. So we're gonna be her next block after she's done with our state championships is gonna be getting her in that to see what she thinks, see how it feels.
Yeah.
Because there's no one around that does that, and that would also give me a channel that if she decided that she liked that and we want to try it for a little bit, maybe we would.
Right. Yeah.
I've not necessarily counted it out. Put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I suppose a bit of a unsolicited advice for me is like I took a break from it for I think something like 6 years, and when I started dabbling with it again, it's pretty fun. Like my perspective on it has changed, maybe even matured. Like I appreciate it more as just like a completely separate thing. Like if my part of my ego is wrapped up in, the numbers I can lift, how much I can bench raw, then it's less like that. When I was getting back into equipment, it didn't seem like it was competing for my attention in the same way. I don't know. It just felt like a completely different sport, which, people talk about that quite a bit, that it is and probably should be treated like a completely different sport. And I think that's reasonable, but it was fun. Like when I walked away from it for a while, I was sick of it. And then, I mean, I guess 6 years does a body good. When I came back to it, it was like, oh yeah, hey, this is fun. It's interesting. Like it sure as hell got my attention. Like the weights are way heavier, and that requires you to pay attention like that. And the sessions are the way I was constructing the sessions at the time. I was training my equipped squat and bench on the same session. So it was like a 2.5, 3 hour long session, like 8 work sets. It was like the powerlifterist training session that you can imagine. You're just slow as hell, but always somewhat out of breath. And just when you got done, tired, but not the same tired as you would be from like a normal training session, just like brain fog tired. And it was neat. It was a little novel experience. So, I mean, I guess you can put me in the camp of like banging the equipped drum a little bit. Like I think it's a valid option. It's a thing there to explore, and especially for people that have a decent end to it, which, I mean, you being experienced with it, obviously. So I don't know.
I think
That'd
it's
be
also
fun.
a little bit of a nostalgia, for us,
Well,
and you want to also kind of keep that torch burning a little bit, because it's part of the powerlifting story.
let me do this real quick, because now I'm curious. So I'm gonna I'm going to Open Powerlifting, and I want to look this up. So the last equipped competition that they have on record for you, I guess they've got an 865 kilo equipped total, which would have been the last one that you did, and that would have been 2004. So I wonder what you could do. So at this point, your raw numbers are, solidly over your equipped numbers, and I wonder what you could do if you made your way back. I mean, that'd be pretty neat, right?
Yeah.
Like you set like a 40 kilo PR total. Like, when's the last time that happened?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would. I tell you this. I would. I was a technician when it came to, especially the squat. I was not I wasn't a great squatter. I really learned how to squat. But when I was in single ply, I was the feet extremely wide, bar down. I was I actually did a decent amount of conjugate style for my last couple of years in raw or in geared lifting.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I think they retired when the weight classes changed. I think I had some of the Wisconsin state records, like in maybe the squat in one or two of the divisions. And we had some pretty good lifters out there. I mean, Sean Kane, I don't remember Sean Kane, but Sean was another one of those great guys. He was a good open and master lifter out of the Wisconsin Hudson area. But yeah, there was a number of good old Gary Frank was actually another one of those that came out of that Wisconsin area before he went down to Louisiana.
Oh, really? I didn't know he was from that area originally.
Yeah. He actually, I believe it was. So when I talked about Bruce Sullivan, I think Gary went to high school in Wisconsin, and so he knew Bruce, and that's how I first got to meet Gary. And Gary was, he's given a lot, a lot to the sport and other federations. But another one of those guys. Time gets us. I think he's got two new hips now.
Okay.
But yeah.
I mean, he's another one of those guys that kind of doesn't get talked about as much as he should, but should definitely go down in history. Like, he's a victim of an era a little bit, I feel like. Like, I think that he was, he lifted multiply. And I think a lot of the reason that people don't know him as much as they probably should is because of that. My perception, and I could be pretty off on this, I guess, but my perception was that he didn't work the gear the way a lot of guys did, and he was just way stronger than everyone else. Like, I would love to see what he could do at like a big dog's meet or something like that. I'd take a Gary Frank in his prime, in a raw with wraps meet. That'd be fun, man.
Oh yeah. So the thing, I remember a story Gary telling me. I think we were at high school nationals one year, and we were both coaching, and he was talking about his conditioning program at the time. And mind you, Gary was about 400 pounds, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he goes, "I try to keep my agility going by playing basketball once a week." I'm like, "You play basketball once a week?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I mean, when I get closer to prep, I don't." But I'm thinking, here's this guy. I mean, I don't know how tall Gary is. I mean, he's not incredibly tall. He's maybe 6'3", and going close to 400 pounds. And I thought, this is a massive being to be that athletic. It's like a Haloti Ngata. I guess that's kind of like what that build, just like a big athletic, like even his wrists were huge, and I think he was the first to go over 27, 28, and 2,900, something like that. He had and that's crazy. So think about that in any context of our sport during any time. Somebody that took those jumps. I don't care what what federation you were, what gear you were wearing, just that big of a domination. to where you're the first person to just pave the way and be that far ahead of the competition. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or like a Steve Goggins, like Steve, another great lifter. You know, you look at Steve, and he was competing at all these meets as like a 242. You know,
right? Yeah, like the WPO stuff, like that was
Yes.
all like these super open weight classes where, you know, like, oh, everybody above 242 is a heavyweight. You know, everybody above 110 kilos is a heavyweight. You know,
Yep.
well, okay.
And at that time, I mean, if you said Steve and Ed, everyone knew exactly who you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
You know, in those circles, and both those guys, you know, great guys. You know, Steve's a guy I've been lucky enough to meet a number of times. You know, and we'll, you know, back for social media every once in a while. And another great guy is giving back to the sport. And yeah, and I love the nostalgic talk. And once again, now here we are talking nostalgia to an audience that's going, I checked out 15 minutes ago. Don't ever have this guy on again. But that's the thing. It's like,
I like it. My podcast, so.
But like these are the guys that like I looked up to in the 90s,
right?
And then to later on, you know, meet them, and they're, you know, just, you know, these nice, great, you know, Tony Harris, another one. Tony's a good friend of mine now. But I remember the first meet I met Tony, we're in the back room, same weight class. I'm maybe in my mid-20s. Tony's, you know, in his prime. Just, he's probably 36 years old, and just, he's lapping us. Like it's like it's not. I mean, there's guys that were, you know, like a good bencher or a good, you know, deadlifter. And Tony was just like he would bench just to get a bench in, and still win nationals. You know, and still take the class. But was just salt of the earth. Talk to anybody, help you out. You're a young guy. I'm back there. I don't have a seat. I come back and it's nationals. Maybe my first open nationals. I'm looking around for a seat, right? And he's like, "Hey, come on over here, have a seat, sit down." And he's just talking to me about his job and what he does, and we're talking, you know. And from then on, I realized I was modeling myself. I wanted to be more of that, because up until that point, I was a lot more of the ego lifter. Don't talk to me. Look what I used to have, you know, multicolored hair, and I was all of the attention. Once again, if you're a competitor, you love the attention. Oh, yeah, the facial piercings, and so I was all those things. And guys like that I met, you know, the Ed Cones, and realized you don't have to be those things. You don't have to be standoffish. You don't have, and that was really a pivotal point for me in maturity as an athlete, was starting to be more of that leader in the clubhouse of let's show what you want people to see. You don't have to be that ego, you know. And there's still playing the character when you're on stage. You know, don't get me wrong, but I love, you know, having the opportunity to talk to all the new young guys coming up, and then watching their careers and helping them out where you can. Because I mean, we've had our times, and you know, I still like to think I got a couple good years left in me, but those guys gave back when they didn't have to. And I think that's what, you know, a lot of us now, as we're starting to see, you know, this new generation come, is make sure you're be accessible, and you know, be present when they're there. I think that's important. There's a little soapbox for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the aspects of powerlifting culture that were kind of passed down in the meet environment, you know. And I mean, I don't think that's gone away, and I think that's you know, a thing that we've got, and hopefully a thing that we keep, because I think there's a lot of real value there. So yeah, I don't know. That's me, you know, wrapping myself in the powerlifting flag. That's all right though. So I guess turning things back to I guess the present day and competing and things of that nature. Would you agree that you're kind of known most these days for being an impressive deadlifter? Would you say the deadlift is kind of your the lift that you're most known for?
Yeah, I definitely say that. I think it's the only thing I can really still compete at any level, any age. I pulled my best. What was it? I think it was 360. I pulled in Canada, and that was about a year and a half ago. And that was the meet that I had food poisoning, and which once again goes back, I guess, to what Mark was saying is, you still got to perform. You come out there and you deliver on the day.
Sure.
And but that was maybe, was it 12 kilos off of the world record at that time for open, and I think the world record got broken, and so I went down actually hoping to break it in Costa Rica this last year, and there's a Canadian lifter that broke it instead. So now I got to go for South Africa.
From looking at the competition results, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it doesn't seem like your deadlift has always been like as stand out as it is currently. Is that right or wrong?
So here's you queued this up so perfectly. So the biggest issue I've had throughout my entire lifting career was my grip. I could pull. I remember at junior nationals, 198 pounds, 22 years old. I pulled 650, something like that, and just smoked it off the ground. It was, and I was like, man, I'm really good at deadlifting. I'm solid. I could break the ground and pull like sumo. I could pull, even single ply back then. I was up in the 700s, mid 700s, until I broke past my knee. And if I didn't get a quick down command, it was done. This was something that later came and caught me again as I came back to the sport. Now, it's not that I have, and I love this one when people say, well, you need to work on your grips. Like, well, I don't drop. I'm not dropping 500 pounds. It's like
right.
I'm dropping 780, and so there's a little bit of a difference in what you do. But I've got, and I don't have small hands. I think Dennis Cornelius and I compared, and we have like the same size hand, but they're meaty. So sometimes, your hand gets in its own way, and you get a tear, whatever it is. So I was doing this, and I forget what meet I was at, but I dropped one, and I'm like, I gotta figure this out. I gotta find out what I can do. And I think I was with Paulie Steinman was coaching me at the time, and he's like, hey, there's guys out there, just look up. And I think it was social media. Mark, is this correct? Was it social media or did you? I forget how I got your number, but Mark and I were not working together. I was working with another coach, great group. But Mark contacts me and says, hey, I heard that you may be interested in doing hook grip. If this is true, just give me a call. And Mark doesn't really know me from anyone. Doesn't know me from anything. He's not my coach at the time. I don't think we've met at that time. Is that accurate, Mark?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yep.
And so I call him up, and he tells me, you know what, here's what I do. And he kind of gives me this scenario of how to work in the hook grip and what it looks like and how to adjust it and so I started playing with hook grip, and it didn't really take at first. And I would get to a meet and I'd be nervous to do it. And I'd like warm up with it. And then I get to 700 pounds. I'm like, no, I can't. And so I switch back to mixed grip. And so Mark and I started working together. And so back to a little bit more. So when I got done I had a meet, it was in Belarus. I dropped on to do the 105s because I thought I was going to do better than I did. Surprised. And that was another one of those times I was ranked number one coming in for the Masters 105s and got beat by two guys that both broke the world record. And I came out of there humbled in third place and thought, hey, I got to make a change with myself. I need a different perspective. And I called Mark from Minsk, Belarus, the night of the meet. And I said, hey, are you taking people? And basically in Mark fashion, he's like, well, that person's you, then yeah. So then we started together, and from then I think our first probably 6 months he was talking to me into going hook grip, and then finally we got to a meet, and I think it was nationals 2 years back, 2.5 years back, and I just committed to it, went in there, did it, worked well enough, and I was like, I'm sold, ready to go. And then that year I believe it was Canada, and so that's when I pulled my best. I pulled that 360 kilo which is with 793 pounds at World.
Awesome, man. That's what a cool story too. Called Mark from Minsk. it's such a it's a powerlifter move. Like, like, hey, I just put down my last deadlift and I've been thinking about this next training cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Just get off and getting your awards. They just had the banquet, and I'm like, well, I can't sleep. I got to call somebody else. Let's do this. Pull the trigger.
Right. Yeah. So the start and stop of hook grip is something I think a lot of people can relate to. And I believe, well, I know that you and Mark and Mark's got a couple of hook grip videos on the RTS YouTube, and then you're in one as well. So maybe you guys cover all this pretty thoroughly there. But is there something that kind of made the difference to you, or was it just mostly, hey, just got to commit to it?
I think for me it was, there's a couple things, and I won't get too far down this road, but there's a couple things that I realized. One was the type of bar makes a difference. And if you're not using the bar you're going to use, it's gonna feel different. It's different than when I would go mixed grip. You'd have a bar that had a little more knurling, or it just felt a little bit different. It didn't affect me as much as going hook grip and then utilizing a bar that I hadn't used. So now when I train, I try to find out what are they going to be using? What am I going to be using as a bar? Because from a Ohio Power Bar to a Tytex to an Alico, all of them have a little bit different feel to them, and it sits differently in your hand. One you could lift and never drop one. Another one, you go in there, you get into it, and every time you get past a certain weight, it seems to tear on your hand. So, or it just doesn't sit and feel the same. So I think the consistency of using the bar that you're going to use during your final training block is important. And then some people really like using tape. I think one of the things I used tape until it started to slide on me, and then I took it away. But it was a decent way to learn what it's supposed to feel like without necessarily having to deal with the excruciating pain of blowing out the end of your nail. Which I know that sounds like fun, so everyone wants to switch over to it now. Right. But you get to a point, right? And there's the competitive nature of, like, for myself, I said, "Oh, this hurts," and I tell these types of anecdotes because I'm older. But I said, it doesn't hurt as bad as taking second place. So for me, I go, you know what? What is this going to cost me? It's going to hurt. It's going to be this way. And now I'm to the point to where, I train the bar. You'll have those days where, like anything, it's something, it's just not in the rhythm. But, I file the top of my nails so I can make sure that I get good chalk in the nail there, really dig down and know which bar. Because I've got, like, the Ohio bar. I can pull on that. I don't think I've had a bad pull, like, as far as like a lockout or letting it go in recent memory. Mm-hmm. But I move over to a different bar. And even deadlift bars. I've done charities where I've pulled a deadlift bar and started pulling on that. And because it's a little bit smaller, more of my hand and, like, the fat in my fingers gets caught in there, and then you just tear open this giant, bleeding hand when you're done. Right. So I think the specificity of the bar makes a difference more so than others. Mark, would you agree or disagree? Am I full of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate. I mean, I've noticed, even myself, the difference between a Alico bar and in a competition when I've been training on an Ohio bar. But I think it's exacerbated by the fact that you got ham hock hands,
Hand hocks.
Yeah, I mean, you got a unique situation. Your hands are so beefy. You got to get flesh out of the way to really get a good grip.
Is that good if someone says that your hands are a unique situation?
He is constantly building me up. It's amazing. It's nonstop with him. It's my ego. He just keeps pumping me full of compliments. Yeah. My hands are Rubenesque. That's right.
Well, you came up with that one now.
Yeah. So that's something that, as far as like me joking with you about calling Mark right after the competition, like that's kind of a mentality I can relate to I had a fairly similar situation at the 2013 Classic Worlds, where I dropped 2 deadlifts and it cost me a gold medal, and that was a pretty disappointing session. So, like, after the competition's over, everybody goes and gets dressed for the banquet, and this venue just happened to have the hotel, the competition, the banquet, all of it was in the same just big hotel. So we're all kind of standing there mulling around before the banquet. And so like I wandered back to the to the warm-up room. I'm practicing hook grip back there because I'm thinking, God, I don't want to drop another deadlift like ever. And if I could fix this in the next 10 minutes, like that would be great. I remember trying to get Brad Gillingham to go back there, and he's probably thinking, like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
Well, I think that's great because that's right. Brad was one of the first that kind of went that double overhand.
Yeah.
And now Brad's the guy that he wouldn't even have to hook grip. Brad could double overhand just about any weight he wanted to.
Yeah.
Because he had these massive mitts. How many 800 plus pound pulls did he have?
I'd have to look at my notes to be sure, but it's over. I think it's over 100.
Something like that. I was gonna say it was 85, 90 plus at least, but in competition over 800. And Brad, and he's another one of those guys that I was lucky enough to know coming up. He's in Minnesota. Having him and his brothers and those guys over at Jackals, just salt of the earth, nicest guys you ever want to talk to or meet. And at the top of Brad was at the top for a long time. And it just that's the part of powerlifting that I think made me fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Was the people that you met, the Susie Hartwigs, Susie Hartwig Gary now, but the Susie back in the day, that you could talk to, and she just always brighten up a room just seeing her. And now we talk with people and it's nostalgic, but I hope that the group, the generation that is kind of coming up now, I hope they have that. I hope they have their their Wade Hoopers, their Brian Siders, their those characters, those people they look at and they say, I remember I learned from this person, and this is why I am who I am now. Because I look at those and I can absolutely name all those people, and there's so many of them, that you had. And I hope that they're taking that and they're enjoying the ride as much as guys, more old man speak, right? But enjoying the ride, because it doesn't always last.
Sure.
When you look at powerlifters that were lifting, in the national level back in the 90s and even early 2000s, how many of us 40 plus are still putting up numbers that that compete in the opens?
Yeah, I think we like to focus on those of you that are, but yeah, it's I'm sure not as many as are not.
Now, granted, I got Dennis Cornelius coming up this year as a 40-year-old.
Oh, that's crazy, isn't it? Like
that is crazy.
That's a little bit. I think a lot of people hang up their belts at that point. They're like, "Man, I'm not even going to age into some records." They're kind of holding out hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that culture is still alive and well, as far as lifters being accessible, and like pick on him a little bit because he's here, but you mentioned Mark was like, hey, I hear you're working on hook grip, give me a call. Like I do think that still exists, your ability to just connect with other powerlifters, help each other. Even I don't think there are that many people in powerlifting that are like too big to answer questions.
Yeah.
At least I hope not. I don't come in contact with very many that seem like that, and I hope that's not a thing. But yeah, if it is a thing, then stay away from those people, because that's not real powerlifting.
I had an emotional. So first off, know this about me: I'm an emotional guy. So for me to see me crying is not necessarily something that is an oddity in my world. But we're in Sweden, and we just got, we're done competing, and we're all going out to eat, and I got this little Fiat, right? And I fit myself, me, Tony, and Dave Ricks, and one other person in this little Fiat, and we're just busting up laughing, looking at us fitting in this Fiat with all of it. And I look back and I'm thinking, I remember the first time I saw Dave Ricks lift and Tony lift, and these were guys that I thought were just like, there was no higher. I mean, they were they were at the top of the game. And I'm looking, I'm like, these are my friends now. These are guys that I have good times with, and I look and I think, how lucky am I?
Right.
How lucky am I that how many people can actually see people that they aspire to be like, and then in our sport, it allows you to have those times that over the years you see each other, and then everyone has families, and you learn the families, and you go into the meets, and you consistently go to the meet, and I look at that, and then I think back to the group that I'm developing with now, some of the younger lifters that I have, like at my gym. We just opened our gym, Odd Barbell, out of Portland, and there are a lot of just first, second year people, and they're doing their thing now. And now I'm on the other side of that, where they look to me and they're like, oh man, it'd be great if someday, and I've got one lifter that she's trying to compete with my IPF formula, because now the IPF formula is the thing and not the Wilks.
Sure.
And Sophie Kaplan, she's she'll be close to making prime time next year as a 63, but she's been lifting for two years. And to see that, though, that young generation is strong in that, and it didn't take a lot. It didn't take a lot. Like I'm not going around preaching and banging the drum of powerlifting, but they see what it is and how it can be, and it's for me, it gets me emotional to be on both sides of that. Being appreciative to see what I got out of the sport, and being able to be with people that I thought were mentors and now peers and friends, and then that upcoming group looking to me as that person that was, hey, at some point I want to be like that guy.
Well, I think that'll be interesting to see like how that changes now with frankly, the increase in qualifying totals at Raw Nationals, because I think a lot of the people that you're talking about are people, like if you want to draw like a generational parallel, there are people that are competing at that meet, people that are competing in prime time and whatnot. And maybe it's not any different. But part of me wonders if it might be, that your chances to form some of those relationships and make contacts early on, it's different now, so I don't know. It's interesting to think about this, and the whole problem gets really complex as you start scaling the sport from the small grassroots sport that it was when we got into it to now it's growing into something that might be different. And we want to keep it growing, but there's all these parts of the culture that, I think all of us would like to preserve, and I appreciate the complexity of that, but I don't know how it all balances out. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I noticed as well that you're doing some fundraising for the Special Olympics in Oregon. How did you get to be involved with that?
So there's a local company called Swole Squatch. They do apparel, but they also do a lot of. So I don't normally take sponsorships and things like that, because I like to be able to speak my own voice, and so they had reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to do, would you want to be one of our athletes?" And I said, "It's not really something I do." I said, "But I'll do a collaboration." I had just gotten back from Jamaica. I was in Kingston, Jamaica, working with a group called Kids Around the World, and so we're building play structures out there. And it really touched me, doing that and doing that type of work. And so when I came back, they had hit me up with it. I said, "But I'll tell you what I will do is," I said, "if you want to do a collaboration and give whatever you would normally give to me to Kids Around the World, I'll do a collaboration with you." And so they came up with a shirt, and it was essentially, I think it was Pacific Northwest Strong. So it was like PNW and then Strength, and have my name on there, and IPF champ, USAPL champ. And then what they did is they said, "Tell you what, we'll give our portion also to them."
Oh, that's cool.
Absolutely. So we raised money for Kids Around the World. And so when they came up and saw that the Special Olympics, this is one of the things they were doing, and they really weren't getting a whole lot of buy-in from it, I jumped on it. I'm like, "Hey, tell you what, let me see what I can do, what I can raise." So yeah, and my wife Melanie and I have a 3-year-old son down. So I've got my daughter Olivia, who's competed in, I think, 3 or 4 powerlifting meets already. She's weighs I think she's about I'm trying to think of the one. She's 63 kilo right in there, and she's already pulled 110, something like that, and she's 14. She did it at 13 years old.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, so she's there. My 2 sons, Deacon is 4 years old. Donovan turns 3 this coming week, and Donovan is autistic. And so for me, when I see Special Olympics Oregon, I saw an opportunity, and not knowing at 3 years old, because he's nonverbal, not knowing what my son's life is going to look like going forward. It's sorry, it's one of the things that gets me. But not knowing what that looks like going forward, I want to support those groups that may support him sometime in the near future. So anytime I'm able to wear, I've got a spot in my heart for kids, and then special needs kids. I look at, because we also have, there's special needs powerlifting, and I've seen some of those kids lift, and man, in Special Olympics, and it is amazing, because I think in our own minds we have limitations and we have perceptions, but if you get a chance to actually go out and see like a Special Olympics in your town, in your state, do so. From track and field to powerlifting to swimming, it's amazing. And so I jumped on that and thought, it's a great cause, and I'm always up for a cause. And like I said, I've been given much, and this, be it this sport, and to which those that are given much is expected, and I believe that. So anytime I have a chance to give back, I try to, and this was one of those where they stepped up, and I want to make sure I can support them.
That's fantastic, man. That's really cool. I saw the link to that in your Instagram bio, so I'm assuming that anybody listening to this that wants to contribute or
yes
that way, then that would there you go. It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that plug.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a great cause, and yeah, it's, I don't know. There doesn't need to be a lot said about it. It's good to do stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, I reached out to somebody I know in Johannesburg, so I'm looking to see if during the time that I'm down there, we can do something with some of the youth groups that are down in the Sun City, South Africa area. So hopefully, if I hear anything or get something from that, I'm going to try to get together some of the old dogs, Grant Higgins and them, and see if we can maybe do something for that too.
Yeah, man, that'd be good.
Good.
So that'll be a fun trip. I'm excited about that trip for you. And, I don't think I'm going to be able to make that one, but I wish that I was, because that's just a good group of guys. But I'll definitely be watching the streams and whatnot. Yeah, man. Anything else that we ought to talk about while we've got a chance here?
I think one of the major things that I have changed when we were talking about health and some of those pieces was the week after nationals, I committed to going vegan.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. So it's something I've tried a number of times and haven't been able to find the way to be able to maintain weight and still keep performance up. And it was one of those where, because what the times I've tried, I had nobody to look to say, oh, this is how you do it, and so I decided I wanted to be that person. I originally was going into it, and someone I said I was looking for people that have done this successfully in the strength aspect or the strength sports, and someone brought me to Patrick Bohemian, and he did some strongman. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, how do you keep the calories? How do you get the protein? What do you do? And same thing as you'd expect, just like in everything that we've been talking about, responded back to me same day. He's like, hey, here's what I do. Here's here's some of the things that I've done to keep my calories higher. So I've actually, like right now, my body weight is sitting at about, my morning is about 119 kilo. So I'm as close to my weight class as I've been in probably a year and a half since having the elimination diet. Now I'm able to take calories in. My training's been a little bit better. Actually, my training's been considerably better. Being able to do reps in some of the lifts. Yeah, and for me, it was one of those where I when you don't have someone that's done it, it's tough to find people that want to do it. And it was my own doing based on some of my own beliefs. But being as that I don't think my existence should depend on having to impact anyone else's, and that goes for animals as well. So that was my own thing, and I don't have anything. I don't speak down on people that that aren't doing this. Right. But that was my own thing, and I wanted to make sure that I could show that it can successfully be done. So if there is anyone out there that kind of was in the same place I've been, where they want to make that transition or want to try it, want to be more plant-based, that they now have a model to go after, to show. So
was there an avenue that you used to talk about this? Because I mean, I don't think I don't think it's for me, but it is something that I'm interested in. Like it's a curiosity of, like, just like you were saying, like, how would you do it if you wanted to? Because there are a lot of I don't know that much in the bodybuilding space. There may be more people on that side of things that have dabbled with it and done it maybe successfully or whatever. I'm sure that exists, but it's this aspect of things that I'm fairly ignorant on. So is there some avenue that you're using to kind of talk about what you're doing and like the tactical level decisions that you're making to keep calories up, to keep protein where it needs to be, and things like that?
This is the first time I've said it in any type of public venue.
Okay, so, get ready for hate mail, man. Death threats coming your way.
Yeah, now I just have to wait for that first mover, right. Being the person to say it, and that first mover, the person that does it after you, that's the one that is the impressive one, But no, I'm kind of right now looking at what those channels would look like, because I've been doing this, it's been about 4.5 months now. And it's, I don't want to say it's easier now, but it does get easier because there's things that you can do. And living in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of great opportunities out here as far as be it restaurants, be it options that you have with grocery stores. I'm lucky enough that one of my friends is his name's Aaron Adams. He's a vegan chef, and he is one of those people that when I had said that this was a channel or an avenue I was going to go down, instantly he's like, perfect. Here's the people you need to look into. So the community is strong, but you're right, in the powerlifting side of it, I don't know a lot. And then as I looked around, asked around to some of the different channels on social media, a lot of them were like, hey, good luck, man. Because no one had that, or there would be somebody that had, but they were more of a local level lifter, which doesn't make it any less impressive, and I don't ever want anyone to think that just because, some of us are able to do this on a bigger stage, that belittles, anyone that's doing it, at a local level, but it just doesn't get as much exposure,
Sure.
and that's what I'm hoping to be able to do is, well, like I've always been told hope is not a plan, but what I'm planning to do is show that it can be done, and that people that have questions about it, they can reach out to myself, or I can lead them to some of those other places, because I know for me, the biggest piece was coming into this, even looking at it 10 years ago when I was originally tried getting into more of a vegetarian lifestyle, plant-based lifestyle, was you're going to lose strength and muscle. That's just how it is. That's how it works. And I didn't have anything. I mean, yes, macros are macros. Science would state that that's not necessarily the case. But then there's also supplementation on things like B12 and iodine, and different things that we draw from meats, because we haven't been utilizing other foods that maintain some of the things we need, zinc. So supplementation now, and awareness now, and larger companies moving to plant-based options. This is kind of the time, I think, that we can, those that want to try this, they can do it. I mean, I'm somebody that at 43 years old, I made this decision based on my own personal beliefs, and I'm still planning on going to South Africa and putting up as close to a 900 kilo total as I can. And I think that's something that will at least show that you don't, it doesn't emasculate you. It's not,
right.
but those are the things that I remember hearing, doing this as well. You can do it, but you're going to lose 10% of your, I mean, this is the number I was given. You can do that. You're going to lose 10% of your strength. Everyone knows that,
Yeah.
And I couldn't, at the time, how was I going to refute it? What can I point to?
Right.
So now it's just showing that this can happen. And so as I age and we realize that, our time as competitive athletes and our time as humans, it will expire. What do you want to leave behind? How do you want to live your life? And how do you want to impact people? And these are the things that I think are important to me. So yeah, here's my new soapbox, I guess.
Sure. Well, it is an interesting thing. And I mean, I'm struggling to find the best way to phrase this, I guess, but I think that so many things nutritionally, wherever they tend to fall, seem to be kind of this slow ratcheting of habits, and it's like if you try to change too much at once, that's where people sometimes have problems. And I know some people feel like, no, I'm an extreme personality, but it seems like in general, when it comes to nutrition, the creation of sustainable habits trumps most other things. It seems to be that way, at least in the case of like general population. The ability to stick with a diet long term seems to be mostly based on your ability to create sustainable habits around that lifestyle, more than anything all that special about the eating pattern itself. I would assume, and it sounds like that's been somewhat your experience as well, that it gets easier. Like you mentioned, it gets easier as you go. It seems like a lot of that might be just kind of figuring out, oh, this is what I eat now. Like everybody has these like little things, well, it's 10 o'clock. It's time for me to eat this. I always eat that. I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
So kind of the formation of all those new habits seems like that would be probably one of the bigger hurdles.
Yeah. And I tell you, my wife, Melanie, she is the main reason that I've been able to do this successfully. We're a family of 5. We have 3 kids. We have 2 dogs. Our lives are hectic. I'm on the road. She's working. She's a personal trainer. she's compete. I mean, she's still a competitor. Also, I mean, she's a hell of a lifter. She's was she a 57, and she's 300 plus squat, coming up on like a 350 deadlift, 170-pound bench. I mean, she's a solid lifter, and all these things that she does, she still has the time to find the ways to make our family meals friendly for me and everyone else. So that meant that whether she wanted to or not, some of her meat intake was going to drop also. And she was fine with that, and I think that's where, that having a partner that wants you to be the best you and supports your initiatives, and you trade off on that is so important, because I couldn't do this with as much as I'm, be working, still training, all the things that we do, if she didn't buy in. But basically, when I said that this is what I was going to do, she said, all right, perfect. Let's figure out what that looks like. And so our meals will sometimes be, I'll have an alternative. Maybe I'm doing a tofu or a tempeh, and the rest of the family is doing a ground beef. Other times, the entire family is doing, a soy-based meat alternative for tacos or whatever it is. And I don't force, same thing. Like I said before, I'm not trying to force this down anyone's throat. So like my kids, I'm not telling them they have to do this. Right. But my daughter at 14, she doesn't mind it, and Mel, same thing. She'll do things that, we may go, now it's to the point when we first started, it was, I had my meals and then the family had their meals. Now I'd say it's probably 50-50. Everyone eats kind of what I'm eating, or there's a split. And I think that just became the natural progression of, hey, you know what? That stuff tastes pretty good. And I think that's the difference,
Well, and then there's the concerns as well. I'm speaking about myself, my own problems, I guess. the problems of meal prepping for a family, and the like it turns from a task to a much bigger task when kind of everyone has their own thing. We do that a little bit too. Like my wife has her diet that she's trying to adhere to, and I'm trying to do something that's not quite fully compatible all the time. And I mean, I don't know, we're also not trying to, same thing, like not trying to drag the kids too much into it. I mean, they're not super picky, but they are kids, so
yeah,
you can end up in a situation where it's like, well, what are we doing this evening? I guess we're cooking food until bedtime. Great.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, there's the pragmatic realities of life, I guess. Right?
Absolutely. And that, and because there's, and then being on the road, like you talk about meal prep and all that. Well, what do you get? And and you have to change the cadence of what your day looks like, because a lot of what I eat now is fairly fresh. It's so I'll stop at a grocery store if I'm going to be on the road, and I'll pack up my bag and then hit the road, and I'll have my day's worth of snacks and nut butters and vegetables and whether it's like almond milks and all that stuff, and I'll have it packed up with me. And it's the same as, and it's interesting because now I don't stop off and grab the occasional burger here or there nearly as much as I would, because and when I say nearly as much, it's only because now there's options in some of these fast food places to have have patties that are not
right.
But it's still, and people are like, well, it's still not that good. It's not that good for you. I'm like, well, if I'm going to Burger King, good for me was not what I was intended on, no matter what I'm ordering.
Right.
So you can't tell me, they're like, well, it's still not great for you. I'm like, I get it, but that clearly was not my thought as I'm going, what I need to do? Eat a Whopper,
Right. Optimal decision making left that station a while ago. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Dude, that's actually super interesting. Like I said, I would love to see some stuff about like just the tactical level decision making that goes into it. Like you were talking about stopping off at grocery stores. People do these like day in the life eating videos and stuff like that. You ought to put one together. I think that'd be really
Maybe I
interesting to
will.
watch. Yeah, you should.
Yeah. Well, if enough people think that it's interesting, maybe I'll do it.
Yeah, well, they may just ask you to give them a call, after this.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
I'm always up. I'm always up.
that works too, right? So, all right, man. Well, we already mentioned that you're active on Instagram. Is that probably the best way to get a hold of you and ask you about this stuff?
Yeah. Ryan Stills _powerlifter. That's my Instagram. As you can tell, it's powerlifting's meant a lot to me in my life, as I have it as part of my Instagram, and mainly what a lot of it is. And yeah, that'd be the best way to contact me, I would say.
Sounds good. Well, man, thanks a lot for taking the time. Thanks, Mark, for being here. It was really enjoyable, man. We ought to have you back on, and maybe we can talk more about the vegan thing, because legitimately I am interested in that and hearing how that goes for you. And best of luck in South Africa, man.
Yeah, thank you both very much. And Mark, Rob, I know you're a little bit quieter during this, but brother, I appreciate everything you've done for me, and that you've been there through the ups and downs. And I couldn't be here doing what I'm doing, be it athletically or on this podcast right now, if it wasn't for you, brother. So thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Love you, brother.
Love you too.